So, you find yourself on the UnrealEntGaming channel. How fortunate for you. I, Lord Frieza, will spare your life as long as you subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, don't forget to become a member of UnrealEntGaming's Patreon for tons of exclusive content to early access media and much more. Do it now, or else.
So with our heroes now finding themselves going head-to-head against Gomah's minions and now having to come ever so closer in reaching Gomah's castle, our heroes' mission to restore their adulthood alongside saving Dende now continues, as I want to welcome you all to my Dragon Ball Daima anime episode number 16 review, as right off the gate from the very beginning, this was, dare I even say, a very interesting episode, because not only do we kick things off exactly where we had left off with our heroes now trying to scramble and figuring things out prior to actually having to come up with some sort of a plan, because now that most of Gomah's henchmen have been laid out all throughout the battlefield, we pan on over to see Degesu slowly approach baby Dende, and there was something about this scene in particular that really went as far as to remind me of Zamasu, and I'm gonna be honest, I definitely prefer Zamasu, his entire character arc, over what I've seen with Degesu and Daima so far, but it was an immediate callback to Zamasu for me, because it was only after Degesu went as far as to pick baby Dende up and kind of use him as somewhat of a, I guess you could say, line of bait, because we've seen that during the episode preview last week, to which Degesu ends up doing and actually executes during this episode later on. But even then, as soon as we see our heroes finally reach the entranceway of the castle, we finally get the previous henchman that what a lot of people refer to as the rip-off variation of the Ginyu Force kind of swap hands with Vegeta, and I really, again, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I really like Vegeta in Dragon Ball Daima. I feel as though his character arc and his overall demeanor is consistent, which to me makes him that much more enjoyable, because he has been consistent throughout this entire series thus far. He's mean, he's grumpy, he's serious, and as soon as Vegeta went as far as to go up front and challenge this entire force by himself, it shouldn't go as a surprise to anyone else to see Vegeta handle business alone, yet again in base, not having to use any Super Saiyan variation against them, and he did it all while his arms were crossed, which again is why I favor Vegeta and Daima, I think a little bit more so than Goku, but even then, it was really disappointing and not really surprising to see Vegeta clear out the entire wannabe Ginyu Force just effortlessly to begin with, which I think that Daima again suffers from a lack of credible villains, even secondary villains to begin with, because nobody outside of the Tamagamis, with the exception of perhaps maybe Majin Ku and Majin Du, actually posed any sort of threat to our heroes whatsoever, and to see them actually go as far as to go and build upon some of these villains in the previous episodes really didn't make any sense, especially if this was going to be the way they were going to be handled, by having Vegeta literally not even try and just slap them around with ease, you know? So that was something that was a big letdown, and it wasn't really surprising because we already knew that the big, quote, heavy hitters weren't going to be this little wannabe Ginyu Force squad to begin with, but I was kind of maybe sort of expecting for them to actually do a little bit more than what they did, but they were complete trash to begin with. But even then, outside of that, when our heroes finally enter inside of the castle, that was when things began to get very interesting, because we see a giant golden statue of Gomah, which I think that was pretty cool to begin with. We see how people are scrambling around inside, and the female demon individual that actually went as far as to talk and trade her hat with Hybis in the previous episode was holding on to the belt that had, coincidentally enough, the third eye attached, and with it blinking, we see how she's completely freaked out. She obviously don't know what it is, and she's running deeper into the castle. And even with that being said, Degesu ends up noticing that our heroes are finally in the castle, and that is a big no-no to begin with, because originally Gomah had set out this giant plan to not even have them reach the castle, but now that they're finally here, something needs to be done in order to prevent our heroes from reaching Gomah. And so, inevitably enough, when they end up traversing through the castle and they end up reaching a point to where they finally end up confronting Degesu, Degesu ends up up pulling a Zamasu-like-esque kind of character trait here by threatening to murder baby Dende, which again is very dark even for Dragon Ball, like, you know what I mean? Because more often than not, people wouldn't expect for things like this, for a baby to be threatened as Degesu was holding it at gunpoint, right? But then, interestingly enough, it was only upon seeing Shin talk to his brother where I found this to be very interesting, because this is the first time that we're actually seeing these two Glin kind of talk to each other and more or less kind of trying to defuse the overall situation here, but Degesu really wasn't budging despite what Shin was trying to do. And with Gomah watching all of this on his little monitor, he was completely freaking out by this because he didn't want to see any of this transpire to begin with. So to see him run around in a circle, kind of lose his mind even after Degesu kind of disobeyed him, Gomah kind of realizes now, hopefully enough, that he really doesn't have anyone that respects him or even want to go as far as to take any of his orders seriously. But it was only upon with Pansy being the first one to try to step in, Degesu immediately had gone as far as to get her to fall back during this moment, because it was only after she tried to attack him where Degesu kind of said, yeah, no, not so fast, until they end up inevitably saving Dende, because it was only during the course of one of the hats that Hybis threw kind of went as far as to distract Degesu, resulted in Degesu not only having to go as far as to fumble baby Dende, but it was Glorio who actually took Hybis's hat and used it as a weapon, as a means to distract him. And with one single punch from Piccolo, as Piccolo went as far as to literally one-shot this guy, it was incredible to see happen, because Degesu is just straight up buns. Like, here we thought he was actually gonna do something, he did nothing, so I'm sorry to say, but Degesu is straight up buns. But luckily enough for Gomah, Gomah ended up finally getting his wish. He finally ended up getting the third eye that female demon was holding on to, which inevitably means that Gomah has exactly what he was looking for. This amp itself is going to give him the power, supposedly, which is going to be enough to have to combat against our heroes and having to clear them out to begin with, and so he was very excited by this. But surprisingly enough, towards the very end, as our heroes finally were able to come across, and I wasn't expecting to see Tamagami 1 there, but he was, and rightfully so, since he is one of the guardians of the Dragon Balls. But even then, our heroes immediately went as far as to notice that he didn't have the Dragon Ball, and Glorio was very concerned by this. But surprise, surprise, Dr. Arinsu alongside Majin Ku and Majin Buu ended up showing up, and this is bad, because in the case of Majin Buu and Majin Ku, we know that they are going to be a formidable threat to our heroes, because at least we know for Majin Buu he was able to beat Tamagami number 1. So this entire spiel is setting up a massive fight outside of the castle. But when we go back in the castle, we inevitably end up seeing how Gomah was able to finally remove the eye from the belt and put it on his forehead. And what this ended up doing was this ended up allowing for Gomah to start to build upon his body and transform further, which he looked pretty cool in finally having to gain some kind of a massive Jiren-esque form. He looked huge, and if they only went as far as to change the outfit color, I would assume that this guy would be a Pride Trooper just based on the color mechanisms alone. But even then, finally at the very end, Gomah had achieved his plan, Gomah had achieved his dream, and Gomah was able to successfully utilize the power of the third eye and inevitably gain a form that kind of put him in a monster-like state, because he looked very huge and very strong to begin with, which only signals to our heroes now that this is going to be trouble. This is going to be massive trouble for everyone moving forward, because not only do they have to now deal with Dr. Arinsu, Majin Ku, Majin Buu, but they're also going to be dealing with now a beefed up Gomah after getting amped by the third eye, which ultimately leaves us off on a massive cliffhanger, which I will say that this episode I think was better than last week's episode, and I think that next week's episode is going to be probably the best in the series so far. But even now, by the end of all of this, I want to go ahead and get your thoughts down in the comment section below about what you guys thought about Dragon Ball Daima anime episode number 16, and given the fact that these final few episodes for Dragon Ball Daima are surely promised to be big ones, because everything thus far is going to ultimately culminate into what is about to happen moving forward. So I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't at least curious to see as to how all of this is going to wrap up, especially if there's going to be any significant connection going into Dragon Ball Super, especially given the fact that this does take place right before the events of Battle of Gods. So I'm curious if they're going to be tying anything into that moving forward by the end of Daima's run, and I'm really hoping that there is going to be a bridge between Dragon Ball Daima and the events of what is about to transpire moving forward in Super, because they are going to have to somehow come up with some kind of a way to explain as to how nobody was able to recall recall any of the events that transpired during Daima and Super, and that is the one main thing that I'm hoping for, because Dragon Ball Daima is set to end roughly around somewhere around the time period of February 28th, so right before the beginning of March. And so it's crazy to think on how fast time flies, but in the end, I want to go on ahead and get your thoughts down in the comment section below, to which once more, I want to thank you guys so much for tuning back in. I want to thank you all so much for your time, to which if of course you also just so happen to be new to the channel, then I do encourage for you all to head on over and smash that subscribe button, on top of making sure to give this video a big fat thumbs up by smashing that like button down below. Tune back in for more, and with all that being said, I want to thank you all so much for dedicating your time and tuning in, and I'll be seeing each and every single one of you down in the comment section below and in the next video. Take it easy guys, and have a great day. Peace.
Hello! Did you know that you can stay up to date with the latest Dragon Ball content by simply subscribing to UnrealEntGaming?
Also, don't forget to follow on these social media platforms, you sexy son of a bitch.
Roshi!
Silent Cell, me and the fans are having a moment. That's right. I know what you want. Extra long, thick Dragon Ball content. Quality reviews with flawless editing. Yeah, you'd like that, wouldn't you? You dirty bitch.
Roshi, the fuck?
God damn it, I need them to subscribe, Cell.
And we're demonetized.
Yeah, screw it. Let's cut to the video.